Assuming a company actually understands that importance, how can they tactically, ethically, and successfully leverage psychology to improve experience and deliver improved business results?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the simple answer to that:
customer experience wisdom, a dash of travel talk. We've been cleared for takeoff.
The best meals are served outside and require a passport.
Today on CX Passport, I'm joined by Vinay Parmar, a leader who understands the human side of customer experience. With over 3 decades of experience across industries like retail, travel, utilities, Vinay focuses on the psychology behind CX, why customers think, feel, and act the way they do, and how businesses can create meaningful connections by knowing that. As a speaker and consultant, Vinay has helped businesses not just improve processes, but also tap into what truly matters to their customers. His work bridges data and human behavior, turning insights into action. And y'all know how much I love that, insights to action, that then build loyalty and trust. I'm curious to hear how Vinay blends that psychology with strategy to help businesses deliver experiences that stick. Vinay, welcome to CX Passport.
Hey, Rick, thank you for having me.
I am excited to have you. And folks, I didn't say it in the intro. I should have said it in the intro. Vinay comes to us from the UK, and you know how much I love getting out of my US borders. And so it's a treat for me to cross the pond virtually with Vinay today.
Yeah.
I do want to get at something right there at the top.
Okay.
You have talked about that it's all about building relationships in the sense of a business context. It's not about product. It's not about service. It's not about features. It's building relationships. I have to imagine that there are quite a few alternative views to that idea sitting out there. Business isn't just about heart. There are cold, hard financial realities. So how do you respond to someone who challenges your relationship view?
The cold, hard truth is that business is about the financial realities. It's about profitability, reducing cost, increasing revenue. But revenue isn't just generated through the sale of products and services. It's generated through trust. It's done through developing trust, and that's the basis for relationships. Now, I'm not saying that products and services don't matter. Of course they do. They're the hygiene factor, right? You have to do what you say on the tin.
If it's just a big old hug, then people are just going to start giving you money even though there's nothing there. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even Disneyland gives you the hugs, but still makes money.
That's right.
Right. And so the way to think about it is this: is that yes, revenue is generated from the sale of products and services. That's a given. But the output from that is you kind of get 3 buckets of people that come out of that process. The first bucket is those people that are your one-time stopping by for just one thing. They're going to buy from you once for a number of reasons. Maybe they're out of town and your business is a local business and they're only going to buy for you because they're there. Maybe it's a point-to-point problem and you're going to solve the problem that's in that kind of thing. They might have had a negative experience and decide, I'm never using you again. But for whatever reason, they are your one-night standers, never going to use you again. They are done, never coming back, right?
Hey, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I have to. Whoa, I haven't heard that one before. All right. The one with the one-night stand. Here we go.
We are talking about relationships, right? So
well, we sure are. Okay.
And then you've got another group, which are we're going to stick around. We kind of like you, but there might be something better. So we're sticking around because we kind of like you. It's been okay. But part of the reason I might be sticking with you could be because there just isn't a better choice. And in business, that could be a lack of competition. It could be like here in the UK, for example, in utilities, your water company is your water company. You can't change to a different water company. It's the one you're stuck with, right? It's the same thing. So that can be a false dawn for it can be a false measure for some companies that just because customers are sticking around, that creates loyalty. It's not. They're captive. They're not captured through better experience. And then you've got the bucket that's the one that I'm most interested in. That is the group that stay loyal to you. They're in for the long game. They're beyond the one night stand. They're in for a long-term relationship, marriage, the whole 9 yards. And we could go to town on this analogy. I won't do. But they are there. They are the guys and girls that talk about you when you're not in the room in the most positive way to their friends, their family, their business networks. They are advocates of yours, and they are trusting enough to keep coming back to you for business time and time again. They're your default. And if you only focus on the product or service, and you treat it like a standalone transaction, you get more of the first two buckets of people.
Yeah, makes sense.
But if you start each transaction with the mindset that this is the start of a beautiful relationship, then something quite powerful happens. There's a different mindset that engenders the way that people interact with customers, the way they decide about how they develop products and services. And that's the kind of premise that you start from. This is the start of a relationship, because in every interaction, what the customer is doing is re-asking themselves, do I trust this? Do I trust this company? Do I trust this brand? Do I want to keep doing business with them? That's the assessment they're making through every single interaction. Now, if they've had a good run up until now, that's sometimes a pretty easy answer because you've got credit in the bank. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But if it's been a choppy ride, then that's dangerous waters, because suddenly they're starting to think, I'm not sure about this. So that's the relationship part. Each of those interactions, just like any relationship that you have in life, is about how do you keep reconfirming, I'm somebody that you want to be involved with, I'm somebody or a brand that you want to trust, I'm here, I'm going to take care of you. Yes, I'm going to deliver what my product or service says, but I'm also going beyond that. And, just interestingly, as a quick stat, Rick, the Edelman Trust Barometer that's done annually here in the UK, in their 2024 report, they said that 81% of customers now hold trust as a key factor in their purchase decision-making. It's becoming a bigger and bigger factor of what people are using to choose.
Hey there, CX Passport travelers. I want to let you know about CX Passport Live. CX Passport Live helps brands amplify their event's impact with the power of live, in-person podcasting. Brands partner with CX Passport Live at their on-site event to help excite attendees, reward high-value customers, and convert potential customers. Bring a new level of energy and excitement to your event and amplify your brand's impact with CX Passport Live. Learn more at cxpassportlive.com. Now, back to the show. That resonates with me, one, just conceptually, living in the customer experience world, and then individually as a customer, because I've been failed by so many brands, that when I do find one that I feel I can trust, whatever that is, whether it's a great dining experience, a great airline experience, good luck, great hotel experience, whatever that looks like, that trust, that what they said they're going to do, they're going to deliver. All right, good. I try. That makes sense. Yeah. I want to later get back into kind of, okay, so great. If that's how a company can make more money, great. Products are important. You didn't actually say that products aren't important, but rather start with the relationship, and then the others will come together. I want to stay a little more theoretical though first, and that is
sure.
Your approach is this idea of psychology, because we've heard so many conversations around loyalty, and I get it. All of that is right. But that psychology, the human mentality of customer brand connection, can you go deeper? Because Lord knows I'm not a psychologist. How does psychology truly affect the customer?
Yeah. Well, look, Rick, I'm not a psychologist either, so we're in good company.
Oh, okay.
But what I can say is that ultimately, I do know that business is about people, and people are driven by their emotions. As much as we like to think that we are not, we are emotional beings. We make most of our decisions based on emotions. We might think we're being logical, and men are particularly good at this, is that we'll make a decision and then we'll backwards engineer it to tell us that we logically made that decision. And often we'll make the choice that we didn't make seem worse than the one that we have made, to kind of just justify it to our partners and our loved ones, right? So that's kind of a process.
Choice rationalization.
Choice rationalization.
Guilty.
Exactly. But this is part of our brain called the limbic system. That's the place and the home of our memories, our emotions. The amygdala is the place that drives our emotions and our behavior. And then the hippocampus is the place that makes our memories and controls our emotions. And so, when I talk about experience, I talk about the product of customer experience is memory, because memory contains the emotions, and it's the emotions that drive our future behavior and influence what we're doing. So the experiences that we deliver create those memories, right? And the more powerful the memory, the most powerful the association with the brand. And across the customer journey, all those interaction points, some are more valuable than others. Some have a greater opportunity to be have a deeper connection than others. And part of that connection depends is correlated to the size of the emotional bandwidth. And what I mean by that is, in times of high stress, or in times of high emotion, what you experience gets locked in. Things that fire together, wire together. So it's kind of like if you think back in your life and you think back to your first date or a really happy occasion or whatever, you might remember the song or where you were because it's linked to a really important emotional memory.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, if you have a negative memory, the same thing happens. So, a disruption with an airline or a particular airport, your bags get lost at an airport. You have a really bad meal in a restaurant and something happens on a really special occasion. Those can wire negatively. And here's the interesting thing. Negative experiences have twice the impact as a positive one on loyalty, like twice as bad.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the experiences is that there's a thing called the somatic marker. And what that is that in those particularly high emotionally intense ones where it really wires together, not only does the customer recall a memory and an emotional response, it can also drive a physiological response, tension in the body, anxiety, heart racing, all of those that can happen. The good news is your brain has neuroplasticity, so it can relearn that, but it takes time to relearn the wiring once it's wired, but it can change. So that's why when you have a negative experience and it's recovered really well, that rewiring starts to take shape.
Yeah, that the psychology of that is that it really helps that idea of why restoring relationships, the Disney phrase, as opposed to fixing issues, really comes into play. That if you fix the issue, all right, great, but it didn't. The word you said, neuroplasticity. Right?
Yeah.
Hey, I got it. But that neuroplasticity, that is not something that comes just after an issue is fixed, because that negative and you talking about the physiological component of that, even as you were telling that, I actually started visualizing some memories, and I could feel my heart actually start to not race, but just kind of accelerate a little bit. Thankfully, through neuroplasticity of this experience, I'm going to get that heart rate down, and we're going to continue to have a good conversation. But I felt it as you were describing that. Let's talk about what that means then for business results. Because if relationships matter, and if psychology is a key component of cementing those relationships, assuming a company actually understands that importance, how can they tactically, ethically, and successfully leverage psychology to improve experience and thus actually deliver improved business results?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the simple answer to that is learn to listen well. And it sounds simplistic, but it's also quite difficult because listening in theory is, great, but in practice it's difficult because here's what happens. Normally when we think we're listening, what we're really listening for is the gap in the conversation, which is the point that I can reply to what you're saying to me. I'm not actually listening to what you're saying. I am listening to you, by the way, but
that's the part I'm going to cut out. I'm not listening to you, Rick.
And if we do think we're listening, the other thing that happens is then we only listen to the bits that are being said that conveniently align to what we're looking for, that back up our thought processes, our agenda, our evidence. So we pick out stuff, so we can be quite superficial at that. To really get into that objective, critical listening, you have to be able to detach yourself and take a step back. And for boards, that's really important, to be able to lean in and listen. Nobody likes to hear bad news about themselves. So it takes, a mindset to kind of lean in and go, no, we really need to listen here. And listening for lots of organizations is normally done through a voice of the customer program. And, we've talked about this outside of here, that it's normally feedback forms and NPS. And there are a couple of problems that take shape in there, right?
Right.
The gamification, so chasing the number becomes the thing. And also that you've now got this weird thing that happens that employees are incentivized around it. So then they have a behavior that says, please give me a 10 out of 10 or a 5 out of 5.
Right.
Because otherwise I get fired and I don't get my bonus. Or I don't get my...
kids don't get fed tonight.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
going to go hungry.
Exactly. And so that's one thing that happens, which then gives you an overinflated view of what might happen. There's also survey fatigue and all those kind of things. You get quite a disparate view. The other thing I think that's interesting to think about is that at the best of times, we struggle to describe how we feel. Like as human beings, we struggle to find the language. We're not all great writers, orators, communicators. Sometimes just communicating to our family about how we feel about something is quite difficult. So now imagine being faced with a box that says, give us a score and tell us how you feel and why you gave that. Our ability to take what it is we're feeling inside and use the right vocabulary and language to describe that accurately in a way that the person reading it is going to get it is quite difficult, because vocabulary is different for all of us. You know, we're on different sides of the ponds. It's aluminium, not aluminum, by the way.
Hey,
and
I've started saying whilst instead of while. Does that
there you
help?
are.
Do I get to
You're
be
learning.
an honorary?
And so language can mean different things. Word means different things. We also have different tolerances. So what might anger me might just frustrate you. So you've got all of that in there. So, but a lot of companies depend on that mechanism for their listening. And what I'm saying is that organizations first need to develop what I call their organizational sensory acuity. That's their ability to observe beyond just one particular lens. And when I was a kid, there was a song about rainbows. I don't know whether you have it in the US, but it's the colors of the rainbow, red and yellow and purple and green. And in the song, there's a line that says, listen with your ears, listen with your eyes, and sing everything you see. And when I was growing up, I was like, what a strange thing to have, listen with your eyes. How do you listen with your eyes? And it's only later when I started to read and study a bit more about psychology and the human brain and how we think, is that what it was really saying is that observation is all of your senses. You know, to be able to listen, you can listen with your eyes. You're watching what happens, right? So organizations need to understand that. So then that's where those conversations with your frontline are really important, where you get that firsthand observation of not just what customers are saying and doing, but how they're behaving. Why using your data points on your website, for example, about where people are dwelling, what they're doing next, where they're going and what pages they're on, how they might be moving through your store or your restaurant, or what seats they pick. All of those data points combined with all the other stuff develops that customer intelligence. And the power of that customer intelligence comes into play because when you use it properly, you not only use it to fix issues and problems that most voice of the customer programs do, but when you create that kind of real strong customer intelligence with those varying different data points, what you can then do is use it to drive development of products and services. And I led digital transformation at the last company I worked with, and we implemented Agile. And a key part of Agile is using customer data and stories to understand what's going on and develop your roadmap. So if you informed by that, you're better going to meet the needs and expectations of customers. You can use it to drive your marketing plan and strategies around branding and what customers are really thinking, both current and emerging. You can use it to think about your recruitment policies and how you're attracting talent. So all of those things come into play, but it starts with developing that ability to listen and really develop that customer intelligence.
Vinay, I want to take you on a place where I hope that our emotions and our psychology will not be elevated. I hope that we can have a little moment here, a little relaxation. I hope that this is an experience that you remember fondly and want to return to someday. I'd want you to join me here in the First Class Lounge. We'll move quickly here and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
I would say the Maldives. I went in 2006, and it's exactly what you see on the postcard. White beaches, beautiful water, snorkeled out there. It was absolutely beautiful.
I continue to hear Maldives as an answer to that question, and then certainly outside of CX Passport. It's just such a journey for those of us that live in the U.S., yet the descriptions that I hear folks like you and others saying, it's certainly absolutely worth the journey. I want that overwater bungalow. I want to absolutely experience nothing but just peace and beauty. Got to get there soon as those sea levels continue to rise. What is a dream? Speaking of getting somewhere soon, what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
I've not been to Thailand and Japan. They're two on my list.
Okay.
Really want to go to Thailand for the culture. I want to see some of the temples and James Bond Island, because everybody wants to see PP Island, right? And then Japan, because I just think it's a fascinating place.
Yeah.
Again, the history, the culture, the architecture. It's two places on my list.
And those are two very wonderful places that I actually have had the chance to go to. And it's interesting you mentioned them, because I think sometimes we think, okay, well, it's over there, kind of similar. At least I never get longitude and latitude right, but sort of on that side of the globe. Yet it's a long way away from each other. So, if somebody's trying to link those, you may need 2 trips out of that, but I would definitely recommend getting to both. One of the things that I loved about both countries, in addition to the culture, is the food. So what is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
So I'm going to be super biased. I love Indian food. I'm Indian. It's my heritage. My wife is an amazing cook. My mother-in-law is an amazing cook, which explains why I was half the size before I got married. And then in those 25 years since then, I've just piled on the pounds and got bigger and bigger because the food is amazing.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love the fact that not only is it a type of food, but it's a type of food you've got at high quality at home. That's awesome. What about the other way? Something you were forced to eat growing up, but you hated as a kid.
I was thinking about this. Not broccoli, cauliflower. I love broccoli, but cauliflower, I'm not a fan.
Any traumatic stories that we need to process through here today?
No, I think my early recollection of eating it was just it. Maybe I shouldn't say it for your listeners because I don't want anybody heaving while they're talking. But yeah, it wasn't a nice experience.
Hey, look, I've had a lot of heave-worthy answers to that one, so fear not. You're in a safe place to explore that pain. But we'll move past that because remember, I said it was supposed to be a good experience.
Yeah.
We do have to leave the lounge, however. What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
So this I'm going to attribute to a speaker friend of mine, Roger Harrop, who shared this tip.
Right.
I now take on holiday, everywhere I go, an extension lead. And the reason I do that is instead of having to buy multiple converters, I now only need to buy one. I plug in the extension lead, and then I can use my normal plugs for everything else. So I never, ever leave home without an extension lead.
Vinay, that's a brilliant one. And when I travel overseas, I too use that splitter that where you've got the power strip there for exactly that reason. Because my gosh, sometimes hotels do a really good job of hiding their outlets, and it's a pain in the fannies. So there's an experience that we could try to help them. The psychology is I get frustrated when I can't plug my devices.
There you go.
One of the things we were talking about psychology, and when I was thinking about as we had a prep call and the conversations around psychology, I have a hard enough time understanding my own thoughts. So how can a company who isn't, at least for now, inside my head, truly understand what customers are feeling?
Yeah. So can you ever 100% understand what everyone's feeling in that instant, in that moment? No, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Unless you've got some kind of Marvel superpower, it's pretty impossible, right?
Or the implants that are coming, right? Eventually, right? But we're not there yet.
not quite there yet. But we can learn to spot the signs, and that requires you having a mindset of curiosity, first and foremost, alongside the listening piece. And look, you're married, right? I'm married, and we both know that when we ask our wives, "Is everything okay?" the quality of the answer when they say yes tells us whether they're telling the truth or not, because they say yes, but the capital letters in the text message gives it away. The tonality gives it away.
Yeah.
So we learn to spot the signs. And so the first step for organizations is to start with, don't take the feedback at surface value. That's giving you a part of the story. You've got to go deeper and really, really embrace the listening that we talked about earlier on, to go down multi-layers, to start to do that. And then I think it's about having that curious mindset. It's asking questions. It's speaking to customers. You'd be surprised the amount of people that I speak to in senior leadership roles that don't use their own products and services, don't use their own company website, couldn't find information that you were looking for on the company website. So actually being somebody who's doing what customers do and using your products and services customers do is another great way for you to do that. And I know there's lots of conversation about diversity and inclusion and stuff going on. We won't go down that road, but the diversity piece beyond the normal protected characteristics of ethnicity or whatever, but the diversity of thought and having different people try out your products and services, again, gives you different lenses from which to understand what customers think and feel. And I think that's the way to get there.
Yeah, that idea of understanding that your customers will be across a wide spectrum. And certainly, yeah, in any spouse, I know that we often, because you and I are men, and so we're thinking of our experience. I'm sure that I do the same thing in reverse to my wife, that I give mixed signals or those sorts of things. And so you're right, the words alone do not do it.
Yeah.
And a company, I like that sort of perspective of just assume that what you're reading first isn't the depth, and reading or hearing or whatever the input mechanism is, and go deeper. Now, that can be challenging because what we're talking about here, if we stopped there and a company truly understood what a customer felt, well, great, but that doesn't do anything. It's kind of the action. It's the insights. So walk me through how we get there to insights. What about the inside of a company as it uses those insights? How do we handle that sort of inside out element of a company, of how they take and process and use those insights to get to action?
Yeah, and you're right. That's normally the biggest challenge, because what I tend to find in a lot of places is that it's one team in the corner of the office that's charged with that, trying to convince everybody else to use it. You have to establish it as a currency of type in your organization. And you almost have to start to create some habits and rituals about doing that. I'm working with an organization at the moment where we're going through this process where we're placing intelligence at the heart of the conversation. So we're forcing people in some way through the process to document in their business cases how they have considered customer data and feedback in reaching their decisions. So it feels a bit falsified right now because it's done by force,
right?
But that it creates a habit. And like in anything in life, once it becomes a habit, and once we start to get into a regular cycle of it, it becomes a natural way of thinking, and people start to default to it instead of being forced to it. It's that old circle of conscious competence, unconscious competence. That kind of learning circle,
right?
That we go through. Like when you first drive a car, you have to think about mirror signal maneuver whenever you're driving, but after a while, it just becomes second nature. You just do it without even thinking about it, and then sometimes you forget that you've done it. Anyway,
I'm waiting for a lot of the people in the Dallas North Tollway to have that as second nature. Right now, it doesn't appear to be from my sample size when I'm looking out there, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So a lot of it is about habits, rituals, make them visible. There are organizations that I know that have driven improvements in their safety by doing things like moving the safety conversation to number one on the company agenda in every team meeting. So it's front and foremost. And there are symbolic things that you need to do like that. Then there are more subtle things about leaders demonstrating the behaviors, being more visible, taking more interest in what's going on, validating for people that what they are looking for is people to consider customer data in their reasoning, and calling that out and making almost at the beginning again an extra effort to call that out, because it's trying to set an example. Catching people doing the right thing validates for people that that's important, so then they go away and do stuff. So you've got some things like that. So it is about implementing habits, behaviors, and being consistent with that, and ensuring that you have from people that not just in positions of leadership, but who are considered leaders through their influence, are backing that story up.
I want to, we're getting close to the end of time here. And so this is probably the last thing I'll have the opportunity to ask you, but you said a word there that triggered a thought in me.
Go for it.
So I'm not going to go, and it reminds me of a post. Now I can't remember, but it reminds me of a post you did on LinkedIn probably a couple months ago now. Forgive me if I forget the timing exactly, but that word consistency that you just said, the sustainability, the repeatability. It's one thing to have a great employee who does that amazing. It was a suit experience, I think you were talking about, who delivers this great suit buying experience, but that's once.
Yeah.
How does a company systematize and repeat everything you just described, from psychology to feeling to insights to action? How does that become sustainable so that it really becomes embedded in business results?
Yeah. The word that I'd put alongside consistency is deliberate. So you have to act deliberately. So from the moment of recruitment, induction, through your daily meetings and conversations, there has to be a deliberate effort to ensure that people understand this is important. One of the things that we miss out when we talk about customer experience, we talk about having a CX vision and what it's like, what we want to create for that. But what we haven't necessarily answered in that is why. Why is the CX important to this organization, and what difference does it make when we do that? to the point that everybody who's not in customer facing roles understands it as well as those people who are naturally in customer facing roles.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you get that articulation right, when people are able to connect themselves with the golden thread to that, I understand why this is important, then it doesn't matter whether you're front office, back office, side office, or wherever you might be, you get that your role contributes to that outcome and you understand why that does that. So I think that's first and foremost. Then the consistency stems from there. So you give people a set of guidelines and guardrails rather than rules. I always work on the principles basis. Guardrails, I call it freedom within frameworks. So you give people the framework to work within. You give them the freedom to perform. That allows them to inject their character, but within the context and the guidelines that you've set. And again, the consistent communication, measurement of, and recognizing that that's happening. So that's really important on the inside. And then on the outside, it's important to kind of, again, have those quality standards in place across the journey. So you understand that how those internal guardrails and ways that you want customers to feel are showing up in that external experience. That, you know, surveying or whatever we're doing, we're not just asking random questions or questions that the rule books told us. Like, I'll tell you a really quick story. So there's a brand that I was talking to that's a pest control brand, and they were talking about NPS. And he said, the trouble is, Vinay, that our customers don't recommend us because nobody wants to recommend a pest control company. So it feels like NPS is not really working for us, but we've been told that it's a gold standard measure. We have to use it. And I went to him, well, what's most important to you in your business? He said, well, trust, because what our customers do is they trust us to be discreet. So if there's a restaurant, we won't park the van in the front so people can see that you've had pest control around and never come and eat there again. They'll park the van discreetly. They'll come and do the job and they'll disappear without everybody knowing. That's what they really value with us. So my conversation with him was then why aren't you just measuring trust? Why are you measuring recommendation? If the most important thing to you is, do you trust us to do a great job? And then will you use that trust to use us again? Measure that. That's your key KPI. And I think, you know, we can get caught up in taking standard measures and KPIs that everybody else uses, but we also have to be flexible enough to measure what's important to us.
I love that. And I love that it starts with, well, what's important to you? Like, what do your customers really want you to be known for? And so I like that. I like that we ended there, Vinay. That was tasty. I really did appreciate the kind of path, and you can see I'm drawing it with my hand for those that are just listening. You know, from the psychology, the getting inside somebody's head, truly understanding it, insights, action, to that consistency, repeatability, and then the understanding how well you delivered on it by getting at what does our customer really want us to be known for? Vinay, if folks wanted to get to know a little bit more about you, your approach to customer experience, the psychology of CX, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Best way is to just look me up. You can either find me on LinkedIn. My website is vinayparmar.co.uk. Okay. You'll find my speaker website there where you'll be able to see the activities I do around that. They're the two quickest ways to get in touch.
Awesome. That's right. And I can already tell that folks would want to have you on stage because this was a very delightful conversation for me. And I didn't, and I didn't have to travel anywhere for it. And so I appreciate that, Vinay. It was a lot of fun today. I'm glad that we got to connect across the pond and talk a little bit at CX and make sure that I never serve you cauliflower ever again in your life should we ever be together. Vinay, thank you for being on CX Passport.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.